Well, here we are with part 2 of Pleasure Island. I went ahead and pulled the plastic bumper off, and then I pulled the steel bumper off, and now I can actually see kind of some of the damage. I can see what I'm working with here. There's a steel cross member right here, that rusty piece, but otherwise this is all plastic. So since it's cracked anyway, and the fan is also cracked on the other side, the whole shroud is bent and snapped. Pretty much everything on the front of this car has to come off anyway. So I'm going to just continue disassembling things. This is my power steering cooler, which is simply just a metal tube. And I got a hose coming from the steering on the firewall, and then this goes right back to the pump. So I was able to just pull it out. It seems like it's a pretty thin wall aluminum, and it's straight enough. So I'm going to disconnect it here, plug the hoses, pull it off, and just keep taking stuff apart. I'm going to get rid of all my fluids that I need to, and just pull this all apart. I'm not really going to worry about it right now, but you can kind of see the gap there at the top of the headlight to the fender. And on this side over here, it's good and tight. Now, I have noticed that this little tab right here is cracked. And so, you know, it's not perfect. But for now, I'm not going to replace every single thing this car needs. I'm going to get it moving and running safely and call it good. Well, I caught most of the coolant-ish. I caught some transmission fluid-ish. But I've got this whole front clip already pulled apart, and I'm liking it. I don't see why that engine couldn't come out right there. I've only got to get it moved over as far as the dowels are, right there in the bell housing. And it looks like I've got room, so I should be just fine. Sidebar here, that is the catalytic converter. There's an O2 sensor on the post side and the pre side, and there's also another one on the back side of the engine. Now, I'm not much of a Ford fan, if you knew that, but I do appreciate the fact that this whole catalytic converter theft thing going on is kind of prevented when you can't get to it. There's no way to get a Sawzall up in there to cut that off, and they might as well steal the car if they want to pull the cats off it. Please don't steal my car. Okay, this might become a rant, but recently I saw in the news that there was a woman who ran over a catalytic converter thief while she was sleeping in her truck. She was awakened by the sound of the Sawzalls, so she just fired up her truck and drove off. And there was some confusion on who the victim was. That's enough of my comment. I have seen signs that this front end's been whacked before. There's just some bent tabs. There's signs of things being welded. Over here, this has been crushed on a little bit. This had something welded to it and ground off. Over here, there's a paint marker and a pretty good dent. And that flange is bent down. So, you know, this is still a pretty good vehicle to start driving with. It's still a pretty good vehicle to take a cruise. You can see how that's straight and the other one's bent. So, you know, we'll get there. So now that I'm to this point, I'm going to do a little cleanup. I'm going to run to town. I realize I'm out of floor dry. So I'm going to get the floor swept up, take some tools and clean them up, get them taken care of. And then I'm going to proceed to remove wiring and fuel lines and so on and so forth. I'm going to have to pull the AC compressor out of the way. I'm going to probably end up pulling the power steering pump off the back of the engine. I'll probably have to pull the starter, you know, things like that. And then I'm going to prep this engine for popping it off of the transmission. I might end up just building a little support, something to hold that transmission in place. So when I remove that engine mount, it doesn't fall down. And, you know, otherwise, I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. No real big surprises here. Some people like to label their wiring. I don't know why, but I've done this enough times that I kind of go, I can look at this. I know this was from my mass airflow sensor. It kind of all lays in place. These are my headlight plugs. I found a plug somewhere over here for the hood sensor. That was disconnected, but it all just lays in place. So if you're worried about taking it apart and thinking, where does all this stuff go? It kind of just falls back into place. That's what I've found.